Hello. You have stumbled onto another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we strive for ways to achieve those two goals and we invite friends on to help us. Today, we're very lucky to be joined by Darrell Evans. Darrell is a fellow entrepreneur, but I'm sorry, he's an entrepreneur. Darrell is a fellow podcaster. But that's, I think, more of a hobby. For his real job, he is a top level marketer, top tier marketer, helping entrepreneurs to grow their business and add more zeros to their income stream. Darrell, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Christine, for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation with you today.
Would you like to start by telling us about your podcast and what the inspiration was for that?
I'd love to. Yeah, thanks for asking. So the name of my podcast is called the MindShift Podcast, and you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. The inspiration for the podcast, oddly enough, it started about 10 years ago, actually around 2009, 2010, 11 years ago by now. And the inspiration for it came out of my years as an entrepreneur. And I'm the only entrepreneur in my family. And coming out of the years of, being a Gen Xer and a lot of my friends in my early 20s were going to parties and clubs and hanging out and doing other stuff. And I chose this entrepreneurial route. And so 20 years later-ish, I was thinking about all the things that I had to do to shift my mentality to not only stay in the game, stay in the fight, right? Because it's actually lonely being an entrepreneur sometimes when you are the only one. You're going left, everyone's going right, because we're conditioned to go to school, get a good job, get good grades, get a college education, fund our 401k, retire at 65. And not to say any of that is not what everybody should be doing, but I just didn't see that as my path. And so the MindShift podcast really started as a micro show called Inspirational Words Today. And what I would do was, back then on YouTube, I would shoot back then I used a different type of live platform. It was a really early live platform. And right now I can't even remember the name of the platform. It was, compared to today, it was clunky as all get out. But I would just go live and I would do these 2 to 8 minute, maybe 10-minute little inspirational clips where I was just sharing the way my mind had shifted around fear, around challenges, around setbacks, around, how do you keep inspiration moving? How do you take an idea and then turn it into reality? And I had that, journey in numerous ways along my journey. But obviously there was a gap between 2010. And there was also something going on in my life, and it was personal. And I was going through a real turbulent time in my life. And we maybe get into that, but I lost a business in 2008-9 with the real estate collapse. I also got divorced during that same window of time. And so I was, at the same time that I was working through my own reset, as you have heard me say, the breakdown moment that leads to a breakthrough moment. I was in some ways doing those episodes for me, and it turned out that they were more they worked out for other people. But the reality was I started a new business and all of a sudden got a little sidetracked, and of course tabled it for quite some time until one of my mentors, Brendan Bouchard, called me out about spring of 2019 and simply said, basically, I can't remember exactly what he said, but when I was sitting in the audience where we were for his 4-day event, it was as if there were not 2,000 other people in the room. It was as if what he was on stage saying was just to yours truly. Anyone who's of faith and gone to a church and the pastor seemed to have said something that day that only spoke to them, that seemed like Pastor Brendan that day. And so literally that night, I set up a landing page for the show. I committed to launching the show because I had just been procrastinating. And we can get into this idea that all entrepreneurs are not go-getters all day, all the time. I mean, I'm a big procrastinator, and that seems like an oxymoron in the grand scheme. But I've enjoyed the show. It's an interview show. We get to interview great people like yourself, entrepreneurs. I like to interview inspiring people who have stories that are not necessarily on the mainstream. We're not talking the biggest name celebrities and icons and influencers on online and on the planet. Although I'll be happy to interview them when those opportunities come. But I think sometimes we can't resonate where we are today with all of the mega success that they've had. So I'm looking for that entrepreneurial journey story where we can really dig into a real story, identify real strategies of where younger entrepreneurs are in their journey, and really help people kind of see themselves in my guests. And so it's been a real joy. And this year I'm going to be doing something neat with it and doing a lot more teaching solo episodes on the show. So it's going to be a healthy mix of interviews plus a little bit of nugget from my head over my last 30 years of business.
Oh, shoot. I thought I had myself on mute there. Sorry about that. And you're hearing all this background chatter. That's fantastic, Evan. I know that we do have that problem, right? It's very easy and I'm speaking about if you were to have people on the show who are like mega successful and things like that, you say to yourself, those people, and I've even caught myself doing it sometimes, you have this with I forget who the author is, calls it the curse of knowledge, right? You know something. And so you start off explaining it at step 7 instead of at step 1, because you just think, oh, you forget how far you've come, right? And so I feel it's very helpful to have people to talk to people and to hear people who are just at the beginning and they didn't forget all the 500 mistakes that they made, and they were able to really engage and I find it more beneficial to me, and I think probably to all your guests as well. And that's why your podcast is so successful. But
and I think the other side of it is accessibility. The other side is accessibility, right? I mean, sometimes you can't even see yourself getting to the person who is speaking on the show, and that's just the side of it. Now, every entrepreneur has to find if they can do it, I can do it too story within themselves. But sometimes what they want isn't even what this huge super giant has ever done. Some people don't want to be known on every platform on social media, and they don't want to be a trillionaire. And so that is where sometimes the disconnect comes in. And
yeah, it's true. I mean, I think a successful entrepreneur has some type of a drive, right? There's something that's forcing you to do this thing. I don't think, and I could be dead wrong on this, but you just wake up and say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur today. I don't know what the business is going to be. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I just think I really just want to become an entrepreneur. I don't want to have a real job anymore. And if you're not, I think you have to have some kind of passion that's pulling you toward that. Although I did read that there's a similarity between entrepreneurs, like if you're a troublemaker in school, like I was,
it's true,
stuff like that, because you don't want to conform. That's like a dead giveaway that you're going to grow up and grow up and be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that, because I think about especially the last 20 years, where I've been around. I used to own a mortgage company. We had 106 mortgage professionals in that company, and essentially they're all self-employed. They worked under our operational roof, but they were self-employed. They drove their own business, and so had a unique opportunity to coach and train those that wanted to be successful, because obviously when someone's an independent contractor, it's only up to their desire to be successful. But that was a unique purview. And then the last decade, we've coached now hundreds, thousands of companies now between our agency, where we do the work for them, and either our strategy training or coaching work, seminars we've run. And what's really interesting is, to your point, that a lot of individuals think that they want to be entrepreneurs so that they can have freedom, right? And the interesting part about it is that idea of freedom is to get away from the corporate 9 to 5, being told when they can take a break, when they can take lunch, when they can go on vacation, how much sick time. And sometimes they think that's the initial pull away from corporate life. But to your point, there has to be a passion, because starting anything from scratch is hard. And the funny thing is, you have zero freedom in the beginning. Like, you don't have any freedom. Look, I'm 10 years in this last company. I'm not free yet. Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I have freedoms, don't get me wrong, but in the first 3 years, I probably worked harder those first 36 months than I worked in the previous 6 years, maybe 8 years combined. So when you become an entrepreneur, you got to really understand what you're signing up for. You're signing up for the future value of freedom. And sure, there's some benefit of being able to make your own schedule and all these things, but that can also come with some hindrances, because when you are dependent on your own self-reliance, you have to be really good at keeping commitments to yourself. because when you had a boss, you kept the commitments your boss made. Otherwise, you had repercussions. But when you're your own boss, you can let yourself off the hook easily. So when I coach entrepreneurs, I'm like, hey, how committed are you to yourself? Like, because it is a different paradigm when you have someone telling you punch the clock, do a certain amount of work while you're on the clock, don't goof around on the clock, come back from the break, go to this project, do this project next, even if it means overwhelmed to the point where you want to shed tears, which I've seen. The minute you become self-employed, it's really a battle of yourself. I have an episode on my show called You versus You. And it is all about this dynamic of, can you look yourself in the mirror every day and do battle with yourself? Because guess what? Netflix is easy to stop and do. It's easy to do laundry. It's easy to take care of the kids. It's easy to go play basketball with your boys. It's easy to go work out for 2 hours versus 30 minutes, right? It's easy to get caught up in webinars and online courses and the next new tool. I mean, I could go on and on, but it's really a battle of your own ability to commit to yourself and then hold yourself accountable. If I can share one tip that I have used as my own motivating factor, when I make a commitment that I really need to keep, and it's a game-changing commitment in my business, I actually assign myself a penalty that requires me to write a check to some organization or charity that there is no chance in the world I would ever donate to that group. And so just the thought, like, it has to be that painful for me, or I can let myself off the hook, right?
That is brilliant. I love that. It's so funny. I think, well, I had a lot of thoughts while you were just talking about my own entrepreneurial journey, and even thinking about other folks who are like, who come and start working for the company, being in real estate. You get people who used to do something else, and then they come in and they think, oh, okay, I'm going to be a real estate agent. I'm going to make my own schedule, blah, blah, blah. They never succeed because, like you say, it's so easy to get caught up in preparing to be rich and preparing to do these things. And I'm just going to, like you say, take another webinar. I'm going to go to the whatever. And nope. And I guess, so definitely 100% for that. I used to say of myself, I work for myself and my boss is a bitch, because really be a taskmaster. But I love what your suggestion about making some kind of penalty for yourself. That is brilliant, because you have to know yourself, right? You have to know, what am I good at? What do I like? And what am I just going to absolutely procrastinate as long as humanly possible?
Yep. Yeah. And by the way, I didn't make that up. There was a book I read that was one of the kind of things of, it was a suggestion in this book about habits. I'm a big believer in habits. I think there's a long gap between coming up with an idea or an intention, setting a goal, and getting to that goal. Because if it was just easy to go from idea to realization goal, that it really isn't that important. But when it's something big, what I've learned is it's just a lot of small steps. You got to get the right steps, but if once you get the right steps to meet the goal, then it's just a matter of repeating those day in and day out, which actually seems to go against the grain of what you might think it is. I mean, the reality of success, in my opinion, is it's simple things that are critical to the reaching or attainment of the goal that are repeated on such a consistent basis over a long period of time that actually makes the goal happen. And it's not just any one thing. It's not just this any one breakthrough. It's this identifying those, what I like to call key results or key commitments, that if you habits would be another way of saying it. In real estate, you and I spent 17 years in the field, so I maybe can, resonate this idea. I remember my mentor early in the real estate business was a gentleman by the name of Joe D, we called him. He's still in the business to this day. He mentored to me back then. Back then, real estate agents were encouraged to either call on FSBOs for sell by owners or call on expired listings to acquire listing appointments. Joe D happened to be a FSBO maniac. He was the king of FSBOs. for sell by owners, the king of calling up someone who wanted to sell it on their own and get in the door and end up listing and converting those. But here's what his process was, and this is where the differentiator was he was willing to close his office door for 2.5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and dedicated that segment of his day to zero distractions. You don't go call him. You don't ask him to come see your dad. You don't ask him to look at paperwork. You don't ask him to look at an escrow. Joe D is on the phone for 2.5 hours a day. If you bother him between 9 and 11:30, you probably could come close to meeting death. That's how focused I'm being facetious, obviously, but that's what I learned from him. And while I chose to go a different path, because I thought cold calling was going to be like the death of me, I hated it, but that's what made me a good marketer. That's for another story. But that's what it takes. And doesn't matter what industry you look at, it's those. What is the key habit? What is the key deliverable? What is the key thing that you should be doing? And absent of anybody else's success, if you just do that, everything else will fall in place, right? That's what entrepreneurs have to figure out, no matter what business they're in, right? I've got an interesting perspective now with over 300 million in revenue growth for companies in the last decade. I can't tell you how many total dollars, because with the way things are reported in the United States, we got to be careful because the IRS says, hey, if you can't prove it all the way through, then you better stop talking about it. So we stopped talking about it in 2016. So we know it's probably well past that. But here's what's interesting. With as many industries as I've touched, with the perspective of sales and marketing that I bring to the table, the work is the same. It's the same type of work, has to be repeated, just very much the way Joe D would prospect for sale by owners. And it's just being able to do it over and over and over again. And all of a sudden it looks like you had a massive breakthrough one day and you figured out the secret or the hack. And those are just two words I think are just overused in this marketing world that we live in. So anyway.
Magic.
Magic. What's the secret?
I can't, who says it? The more harder I work, the more lucky I am.
Luckier I get. That's right. And that's the truth. It's the truth.
Yeah.
The other way of saying it is, it takes years and years and years to become an overnight success. All right. Years and years to become an overnight success.
So have we talked everybody out of becoming entrepreneurs yet?
I hope not. I hope not. We're just speaking the truth. We're just speaking the truth.
Yeah.
The reality is, on the other side, I wouldn't trade entrepreneurship for anything, no matter what the ups and downs have been. From a personal life standpoint, it became the only path for me that made sense. I had an early relationship breakup in the 90s. I had 2 children in that relationship. Their mother chose to move to Texas. I live in Nevada. That's 1,175 miles away is where we were. I had to make decisions on how I was going to stay relevant and present in my son's lives through the distance that was inevitable. And at first I said, well, I'll just move there and cut the distance. And came back after a year realizing that was a horrible idea, right? It wasn't horrible because Texas is a bad state. It wasn't horrible because she did anything different, or our relationship was just over. And the reality was, me being in Texas for the wrong reason was just going to make me miserable. So I had to figure out what life looked like as a parent, distanced from his children at the time, and how to remain as present as possible from that distance. And at an age when they were not, we didn't have cell phone. Well, we had cell phones, but no, we didn't have cell phones now I think about it, but there was no way to communicate with a 7 and 2-year-old, right? Every single week without having a relationship with their mother that would be amicable enough for at least us to get on the phone where I could say something to them, whether they were engaged in the conversation or not. And so I ended up having to learn how to be a great co-parent. She, bought into the idea as well. But being an entrepreneur, with the way my visitation rights were, it required me to fly there and pick them up, because you can't put a 2-year-old and 7-year-old on a plane by themselves. So I would fly, go get them, come back, fly, go get them, come back, fly, go get them, take them home. I mean, it was, what company would have gave me time to do that? Nobody, right? First of all, I probably would have been broke if I hadn't been an entrepreneur trying to do it. I was damn near broke as an entrepreneur trying to do it. Plane tickets ain't cheap. But that's off the path. But everyone has to have that motivating reason why they're going to stay in this fight called entrepreneurship. So
As you said, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I know it's definitely not for everybody. I've seen a lot of people they just need to have that guidance.
Yes.
And I always, fought against the guidance when I had a real W-2 type job. So,
Yeah.
but you've touched a couple times on your current life, your current entrepreneurship. Will you talk a little bit about your journey, because you didn't start off, did you start off as a marketer actually? That wasn't.
It's interesting. No, I didn't technically, but I'll just tell the quick story of my journey because it is a little interesting. So in high school, I actually picked up a little job with Taco Bell. Just wanted money in my pocket. But little did I know that a few years later, I would become the general manager of a restaurant in the Taco Bell system. So at 20 years old, I accepted this position to become a general manager and manage an entire store. And here I am, all of 20 years old, and the majority of my team were older than me. So I got an interesting perspective inside the running and operations of a franchise. I was responsible for everything from the top down. I was responsible for everything on the P&L. I mean, it was a very interesting and great learning experience, and I treasured that window of time. I ended up paying for college through that job. I stayed here at home, but I became a real estate agent in that same window. And as I mentioned to the earlier part of the story, I wasn't interested in doing what Joe D did, which is be on the phone, get pounded by people on the phone all day. I just didn't have the nails for that. My skin was a little too thin, I think, at that time for people just saying, you're the 51st person to call me today. I just was like, there's got to be a better way. So I ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Mark, who happened to be Mark McKee. He happened to be one of the top real estate agents in Nevada at the time. And one thing I've always believed in as an entrepreneur, as really a learner and a student of achievement, is there's no sense in recreating the wheel. So I'd mentored under Joe. I loved what he was doing. He was mega successful, but I'm like, that's not for me. I checked out this guy, Mark, and I'm like, Mark is the number 2 guy in the state of Nevada. He happened to be in my office as well. And I'm thinking, what is Mark doing? I didn't see Mark on the phone all day. I'm like, what is Mark doing? So I decided to sit a few of his open houses. This gets to the marketing story, and I'll fast forward. But Mark was doing something called direct response marketing using direct mail. People were actually seeking him out after receiving his information in the mail. And I'm like, I like that. So needless to say, I went down the direct response marketing rabbit hole between 1993, 4, 5, 6-ish, and just became fascinated. I used to study from people like Dan Kennedy, Brian Tracy, and some of these other folks. Ended up coming on to By Referral Only at the time, Joe Stump's group. And I just became fascinated by this idea of being able to target message a letter or a postcard to the person who might have just had their house on the market. Or so I would do this target marketing, and all of a sudden I was an early adopter to what is today's word called inbound marketing, if you will. And I used to use an 800 phone number on my advertisements, and people would call into an 800 number and listen to a message, and there would be 3 or 4 options to choose from. So 1-800, you know what, extension 1 if you're interested in this, extension 2 that, extension 3 that. And that was a way I would get leads. And so I became fascinated with it, which then led to the transition of the decade of 2000. The internet started really picking up steam. And I started my first website. By now, I'm in the mortgage industry as well. So I have a real estate license and a mortgage license. And I really was more pulled to the mortgage side of things. So I launched my first website, launched my first email marketing campaign in 2003. And these are early days, internet marketing, right? So 2005, I now own a mortgage company. So at the time, I was an independent contractor of my own practice. And then I co-partnered and owned a firm. And I saw Quicken Home Loans and the other one called Lending Tree. And I was like, wow, what are these guys doing? And they're using the internet, and they're actually getting people way before they ever reach the mortgage company or the bank. And they were like the quarterback of the transaction. And I'm like, man, why don't we create something like that? So I launched I picked an associate in my company at the time, and I said, hey, you seem to be talking the same language. We're the only 2 talking internet language at the time. My business partner wasn't, his wife wasn't. And so I said, well, let me talk to this other guy. He seems to be talking the internet with me. So we partnered and said, hey, let's launch this internet marketing division inside our agency at the time, inside our mortgage company. And so we did that in 2006. I was hooked. I literally was hooked. And so I started a YouTube channel in 2007, LinkedIn in 2006. I mean, I was an early adopter to social media, and I just simply looked at the internet of saying, hey, why should I repeat myself every single time I get a new customer when I can just create a video, answer all the questions from all the traditional questions they're going to ask me through the transaction anyway? Why don't I just put that on a YouTube channel and send them a link to the channel so that I don't have to repeat myself with the same valid 35 questions? And so that became the home run for me. And so I used that channel on on YouTube, and then I used it across my social media channels to sort of be an early publisher of content marketing, which is what they talk about today. I didn't run a blog at the time, which probably is a regret of mine. I didn't go down that path, but I was hooked. Fast forward to 08, 09, the market crashes. I had a lot of investor clients, business owner and investor clients who had bought homes, bought mortgages, that kind of stuff. And their businesses were, their P&Ls had tipped over with the economy, and they couldn't get money out of their house. So I'm now sitting in a chair where I can't help my client get cash out of their property or cash out of their business because the P&L has tipped over. Because as we all know, banks only give you money when you don't need it. And of course, in 2008 and 2009, we know what was going on. Banks were literally closing credit lines for no reason. Because they were under pressure. So, I specifically lost $100,000 in credit lines overnight, did nothing wrong, never missed a payment, but they cut my credit lines to nothing. And whatever the balance was all I could borrow. And so, of course, that not a lot of people know that story, but that's what squeezed out a lot of us small mortgage players was they forced us because they just refused to give us credit, even though we hadn't done anything wrong. But that's for another conversation. But in this transition moment of '09, I'm building I made it through the crash. We lost the company, sure, but I kept my business, my production business. And I'm getting all sorts of business from all over the country, even over the world, Korea. I mean, I had some very interesting transactions, Saudi Arabia, people buying up the Vegas market because it was completely obliterated. And I'm thinking, all these people are finding me online. Like, I don't know how anybody can survive without the internet. And that was maybe some naive thinking, but in my mind, the internet was the only way to grow a business anymore. Well, as I looked around, none of these customers of mine were using the internet. They were still putting $33,000 a month on a page in the phone book, $3,000 a month on a billboard, $3,000 a month on television, radio, and all these. And I'm like, hey guys, what if you started using the internet? And so I did some consulting gigs, 2009, met my business partner around that same time, taught him a little bit about what I was doing. And I started seeing these clients' business not turn around like overnight, but start gaining traction again. And at that time, of course, I was thinking, do I really want to stay in the mortgage industry? Because I had some lifestyle goals. And I think I was at a point where I'm thinking, I'm not sure I'd like to stay in the industry from a lifestyle perspective of what I wanted. And so I decided I was going to transition and really go to help businesses with the growth that I had been seeing in the early days of the internet and help them see it and make that pivot. And that's what led to my partner and I starting Yokel Local, which is our digital marketing agency. And we initially started working with local businesses. Of course, now we work with companies all the way from local, small brick and mortar, all the way up to professional service and SaaS. And it's been a really interesting, fun ride. Difficult, more difficult than my real estate business was, more difficult than my mortgage business was, because the internet is constantly changing. Social platforms are constantly changing, but the challenge has been great. But at the end of the day, a lot of our entrepreneurial clients, they want to be great at what they do, and they'd love for us to bring our expertise so they don't have to think about it. And that's been the journey of ours for the last decade. It's not just in marketing; it's in marketing, sales. We work with startups to help them get their things off the ground. I'm in a fortunate position to work with a startup accelerating organization that brings companies out of the startup phase into venture capital funding. And so it's been a really neat ride.
Fun. So you do both, right? You will help them to gain their own expertise, like in a mentorship role, and then you also will do the marketing for them. Is that right?
Yeah. Some companies are wanting to outsource the whole marketing department or outsource good chunks of it. Because listen, at the end of the day, you can hire people on staff. Then you're going to have to train them, get them the tools, get them the education, keep them, continually educated. That is going to be right for some companies. And in most companies, depending on their size, that's going to be the best option. And they may have the resources to do it. In other cases, you need speed of execution as well as strategic thinking. And you just don't have time for the ramp up for the younger marketer, younger, not in age, but in experience, right? So we can bring a team in of experts. I only hire people that are really good at what they do. Thus, we're a little bit, we're not the cheapest folks on the planet. But what I love to say is when we do our job right, our clients pay zero, which is interesting because it looks like they're paying us 10,000 a month or 15,000 a month or 5,000 a month. But in reality, we impact sales in such a way that, let me ask, one of the clients, this is an interesting story, but it was one of our earliest home runs with a client. Here was a company that was $4 million. It was a local business. He kind of hit his threshold of grinding his way through the business and growing it, on his own. And we took him to 11 million in 2 years. He paid us 250,000. That's it. How many times would you play that game, right? And he ended up exiting at 35 million.
Wow.
And so that's what we look for. We're not in the marketing business just to punch social media posts or to create cool looking graphics. And that's old marketing. That's old creative marketing. We're in revenue generating marketing things where we're affecting the buyer's journey, and we're showing you up in a place where your customer is likely to want to take a step closer to you to buy, or they could be your customer and have no idea you exist, right? Because back in the day it was trade shows, and today we're living in the pandemic still. I can't tell you how many companies built their businesses on the back of trade shows, and they book out $300,000 a year in budget for trade shows, and now those trade shows are gone, and so now they're literally invisible. They are literally invisible to their ideal customers. And so we help companies really with this fast transformation of going from, I used to do it offline, face to face, belly to belly, fly my sales team around the country or the world. And now we can instantly build them an online presence in a short order period of time. And through, of course, paid advertising, push their message out as opposed to waiting for a show to come up and putting them there. So we impact the bottom line. And I think that's what marketing should do today. I don't think marketing should be just, well, I pushed out 22 tweets today, and that to me nauseates me, because it's just not what marketing is today. Marketing must impact the bottom line. And so where we're a good fit for doing the work, both strategically and execution wise, that fits. And then other places where we're in an advisory role, and I spend a lot of time there with companies where they've got hands on deck, but those hands on deck need a little coaching. They need a little training. They need to know, push these buttons versus that buttons. Think about the strategy this way versus that way. Here's where you should go to research. And I really love that aspect. I'm actually less involved with the execution side of our work in our company. I'm more involved in some more of that strategic work, which is really, really fun to do, especially helping companies like, I'm working with I'm talking to some startup founders right now, and they've created a device in the field of engineering for, I can't give it away because I'm NDA, but let's just say it's in the manufacturing-ish kind of world, and it'll cut expenses in the companies that it's a good fit for by 50% in this one area. Sorry for the folks that are doing that job manually today, but it's that much more efficient. It'll cut costs. It'll be more accurate, all the things that technology is doing. And again, we're thinking they're going to go out to trade shows and get this done. That's not going to happen. So, so we've been, contracted with them to think through because their market is only about 300 customers in the entire United States. 300, that's it. So now we're helping them think through, how do we go after those 300? How do we become visible to those 300? And inside, obviously, you can tell those are pretty big companies. So how do we then get to the right person who makes that decision? And so it's really interesting figuring out how to use digital and the different platforms, ways to both push and pull our message out for that particular, because whoever has that, if the right person sees the message who has that problem, it's an instant pull in for a conversation. So those are and of course we know what their revenue projections look like. So those are good conversations. And I love the strategy side of the business, but I came from execution first, which is, a little different. I'm not theoretical. I've got tons of data to back up what I say.
But I would think, I was going to ask you what your favorite part of the business is, but do you like the mentorship, or you just like I would imagine you as enjoying getting, bringing people along and teaching them and seeing them evolve.
Yeah, I'm at a place right now, Christine. It's a great question. I find more fulfillment in getting them to get the aha moment. I love getting someone who's had frustration, who's had doubt, who's had concern, and seeing the light bulb come on in a way that I think is normal, but when it hits them, it's game changing for them. And I think that's the best part of where I'm at right now, because again, it's not just getting that aha moment from an idea standpoint. Again, the mind shift of what they might have been doing that they thought was right, or what they were doing that maybe was so close. Thomas Edison likes to say most people gave up just at the moment of the breakthrough. And I'm butchering the quote, but I believe Thomas Edison said something along that line. It's very interesting to see that they've done the work to get to a certain point, but have met with uh, less results than they had hoped for. And they will literally tell me, Darrell, here's what I need done. And I'll say, here's what you should do. And then they'll say, well, we've already done that. That didn't work. And I'm like, well, let's take a look at what you did, and I'll probably find out why it didn't work. And then they're like, oh, it's like, oh, I get it now. And the problem with the internet is everything is free to start. Set up a Facebook ad account, free. Set up a Google ad account, free. Set up an Instagram account, free. Buy a CRM today, damn near free. Free MailChimp is free. I mean, almost everybody lets you get started for free. Getting a website and putting it up tomorrow, just about free. Everything is just about free. The problem is success isn't free. Scale isn't free. And the problem is the platforms with all of their help guides, Facebook, Google, all of those platforms, even the people who reach out to you from the platforms to try to teach you or help you, they actually have an incentive to get you to start the ad. They don't have an incentive to get you to start the ad right. They have an incentive to get you to start the ad. They make money from ads. They're not supposed to tell you exactly how to do it. Their job's to get you to move the ad forward once you get a free account set up. And so
Right.
unfortunately, there's some unintended consequences there. And of course, then all of the other um, challenges with technology. And so for us, it's really about getting that aha moment, getting alignment with their strategy and their thinking in alignment to what's going to actually work. And then we can, again, prove it with just, I can back it up with data for days. I'm a guy who has a finance degree. So I have a bit of an analytical background. So I love the analysis side of the business. I love proving hypotheses with execution and facts, whether it worked or it didn't work. Right. And that's the other side of it is if you hypothesize that we're going to go this way for this reason, then put a plan together, then we execute it, then the job is for us to review it and decide, did we get the goal that we wanted or not? And if we didn't, it doesn't mean we failed. It means we have to tweak, we have to modify, we have to adjust. And that's what we call a flywheel in our business. And that flywheel is constantly moving. And that's what marketing is. That's what sales is. It's not really this one thing that we did that got us to the promised land. It's an iteration of failures that lead to success. And some people get kind of weird when I say this, but some people say, hey, Darrell, I'll be on a 30-minute call, which is what I do for people for free, just to kind of get an idea if they really think that they want to engage. And we'll have a real deep, rich conversation. It's not a sales call. It's a deep conversation about where you want to go. What have you done? How can I help you? What's standing in your way? And before we finish the call, I want to give them something, whether they hire me or not, whether they consider our group or not, whether I'm a good fit or not. I want to make sure they leave the call feeling like they should have paid $1,000 because that's what I charge. But this particular call is free. If you leave the call and can't feel like I gave you something that was at least worth $1,000, in many cases it's going to be worth 10 or 15 because I'm going to find one tweak in something you said and you can go use it for free from here on forward. But it's really that getting those calls and getting them to get that aha moment, whether they work with us or not, is really, for me, that's everything that I live for. When I enjoy those calls, I enjoy them. Like I've never considered myself selling one thing in my entire life. And I say that sincerely because my job is to listen, ask questions, figure out if there's a good fit. And there's no reason for me to say, I'm only going to give you the information if you pay me, because that's just a scarcity mentality. Now, I don't do free calls all day just to give away free advice all day. Otherwise, because I'd be out of business if that was the case. But the reality is that mentorship, that guidance, giving them an idea and a breakthrough, super fun for me to do in the business.
Daryl, I got to schedule a call with you.
Sure.
Because I have so many things that I feel like should be working in my own marketing, in my own business. And I'm just like, why isn't this working? And so then you just say, oh, forget it. No one's ever
Well,
going to find me on
it's your show.
Facebook.
If
No
you
one's
want to
ever
do
going
it
to
now,
find me.
I'll give you an idea now. If you want to do it now, it's your show.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we can't have I'm going to need at least a half hour. So.
Gotcha.
But but along those lines, I mean, we're getting to the end of our time. I obviously need to respect your schedule, but I want to pick your brain as much as you
Sure.
can
Go ahead.
possibly share in this time.
Go ahead.
For a new entrepreneur, or for somebody who's just kind of starting out and just trying to explore all the many, I'll give you a scenario.
Yeah.
I just got my coaching. I just became a certified life coach.
Oh, nice.
My own random reasons, but all the people in that class, we're kind of still in touch. We're coaching each other and getting to better at our craft. And so many of them are like, oh my God, I got to get a website. I got to get this. I got to get that. How am I going to attract clients? And I think to myself, well, I don't know that someone's going to want to find a life coach on the internet. But I mean, I don't know.
But it's interesting. I got you because I've worked with several life coaches. We work with all kinds of coaches, right? So you're right. Here's the easiest way to think about it. Accept the fact that nobody's Googling for a life coach. No one's sitting on Facebook hoping a life coach is going to fall through the news feed, right? So here's how I describe it. And it's a great point, because I think anyone listening to this show from a marketing standpoint, I've said this so many times, I literally don't know how many times. It's been at least 10,000 times. Here's what I'll share with you. You're a life coach. That's who you are. Life coaches help people solve some type of problem. So you're always going to position your messaging around the problem that person wants to solve. Example, if a life coach is great at spiritual healing, then their messaging is going to be around spiritual challenges, and you happen to be a life coach, right? Let me use a practical example. Nobody wants a personal injury attorney. No one ever wakes up in the middle of the night and gets on Google at 10 o'clock p.m. and says, I wonder who I'd work with if I ever crashed my car where someone hit me and they didn't have insurance and I was injured, and there possibly could be $1 million suit and I was still healthy at the end of it. I wonder who I should use, right? Said nobody ever. What people do is they're walking through life at certain periods of time with certain problems that you as a life coach can solve. So the first thing I always tell new businesses of any kind is get crystal clear on the problem that will be solved at the end of whatever the process is that you take them through. You can forget that you're a life coach. It's someone woke up at 10 o'clock at night because they couldn't sleep, and they went to Google, hypothetically, and they were looking for an answer. I always use the example, and by the way, and a life coach is one way to solve the problem, recognizing that there are many ways to solve a problem. When I teach seminars, I always use a very simple example, like a headache. So I wake up with a headache. It's not a migraine, it's just a headache, but it's been going on for several hours. I have to, I'm a person who doesn't like to run to the medicine cabinet. So I'm the last person to run and take Motrin or aspirin or acetaminophen, whatever they call them. I will try other things first. I will drink water. Maybe I'm dehydrated. I will maybe go get a massage. I will maybe lay down and take a nap. I will maybe stretch my neck a little bit and see if maybe I just have a little kink in my neck. If it persists along that period of time, and if I can tolerate it, I will wait until it's time to go to sleep that night and see if I wake up with it the next day. So I will take a more naturopathic way of trying to get rid of the headache. But it doesn't negate that there is people that want to take the ibuprofen or the acetaminophen first, but then it might turn into a bigger thing where they have to go a different route. There's many ways to try to attack a little small headache, right? So in your life coaching, it's finding out what the problem is and being really clear of, I say it this way, do your best to sit in the seat of the person experiencing the problem that you can solve through your coaching methodology and your process, even if you've never been in that situation. And that is really hard to do. It's easy to say, hard to do. How do I get in the head of my companies that are in different industries, 36 industries now we've worked in? How the heck are we able to, not me personally, but me and my team, how are we able to get into the mind of their customer? Yet I've never wrecked my car. So if I think about a personal injury attorney, I've never slipped and fell. I've never hired an attorney for those reasons. How do I get in the mind of an auto collision center, and how do we get that guy from 4 million to 11 million? How do we go and work with a software company that is selling a CRM in the cannabis space? I don't smoke weed. I mean, I don't, you mean, just me. I mean, but it's like, so the exercise is, it doesn't matter. Through research, you can identify all of the emotions, all of the thoughts that are going on in that person's mind, all of their feelings, all of the frustrations. There are enough blogs, there are enough books, there are enough magazines, there's enough Facebook groups where you gather all that intel. Your job at the beginning of entrepreneurship is to gather intel on the problem that your customer wants solved, that you can solve in such a way that you can almost explain the problem better than them, right? And so at the very beginning, that is the part. It's not hurry up and go set up an Instagram page and start posting. It's not jump on Facebook Live and just randomly start talking about your new certification as a life coach. It's not about that. It's speak into the problem that precedes the solution that you can provide, right? I remember, I tell a story all the time. I got divorced, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Well, I didn't know I was going to get divorced. I didn't sign up for that. Like, I didn't know that. Like, but there was a sign like 12 months out that maybe that could be a potential problem for me. But it didn't make me go stop researching who I was going to hire for a divorce attorney, right? What I always say is your customer might be 3, 4, 5 stages away from the awareness that they need you. Speak to the signs 3 or 4, 5 stages away through blogging, through video, through posts online. Because if you're speaking 3 or 4, 5 stages before they need you to purchase, you're going to become attractive in the sense that you have jumped through what I call the psychological, you've jumped into their psychology, because you're speaking things about problems they're experiencing that could ultimately lead them to say, you know, maybe I should work with Christine. I don't know what her life coaching is about, but she seems to really be speaking right to me. And all that being said is that we spend a lot of time on that work way before we ever get to tactical stuff, but it's really speaking to the problems that precede the solution that you provide as a life coach, and being as crystal clear about those problems. And again, trying not to solve them all. When I first started my agency, my marketing agency, we solved problems for one type of customer. If you had a business that was multi-state, multinational, even nationwide, go find somebody else, because we're only focused on local businesses right now. You had to have 4 walls, or you had to have a professional services business. We didn't do e-commerce. I say you've got to have a minimal viable focus at the very beginning. Then you can expand. And I've done this in all of my life. When I was in real estate, I only worked with first-time home buyers. Only. When I got to the lending industry, I started in what was called the Alt-A market initially. When I started in the marketing agency, I only focused on local businesses initially. I believe so much that if we can narrow our focus such that we know the problem in such a way that that person sees you as the expert. By the way, all the bigger companies in my space have the same problems. They're just at different stages. All the problems are the same, right? All the problems are the same. If you get divorced and you're broke, or if you're divorced and you're a millionaire, the emotions are the same. The emotions are the same. But is it easier to get a millionaire client, or is it easier to get someone that's, you know what I'm saying? It's just like figuring out where you're going to go in the market. So I don't want to go too crazy on that, but beginning entrepreneurs, focus on a narrow niche, get into the mind of your client. I do this through a process we call empathy mapping. Empathy mapping is taking you through 4 conversations in your ideal customer's head. And by the time we're done with those 4 conversations, you've essentially become a mini copywriter. And I can assure you, nobody wants to go sign up for a copywriting class. I've never taken a copywriting class. I've been writing quote unquote copy, as the industry would call it, since I was in my early 20s. I've never taken a copywriting class. I've literally lived through this empathy map process such that I can understand what my customer is going through, what they feel, what they see in the market, what they're hearing, what's their emotions, and then tying essentially their words into my advertisement. And it just seems like it speaks right to them. And then they come naturally right through. That's why I say I've never really sold anybody anything, because when they are solving a problem they wanted to solve and you're just the conduit, it's not a sale. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Oh man, that's gold. That is gold. Darrell, I just, I wish I could talk to you for another hour, but I know you have another meeting. And so I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I can see that
Thanks, Christine.
passion. See, so that's why you're a great entrepreneur, because you
Yeah.
love it. You love it. And you're willing to treat it like your newborn baby and stay up, right? Never go to sleep, right?
Yeah, I'm a little bit nerdy about this, but I'm nerdy for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think entrepreneurs are the fabric of our economy. I've said this for decades now. I think as the entrepreneur goes, so goes our economy. I love big business. I love all the big giants. Don't get me wrong. They were all small entrepreneurs at one point.
Yeah.
But I think so, I think the number is still in the neighborhood of 55 or 60% of all jobs, full-time jobs, are hired in small firms. I look at what I do as an extension of the growth of communities, because if I can help an entrepreneur grow their business, it's going to support their family. If that entrepreneur really grows and scales 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, whatever it may be, we're about to close a deal with a company that wants to go 30 million to 100 million. And it's going to be one of our bigger jumps for clients, for us, notwithstanding some of the big companies we work with, but I don't like to count them in our bucket. What that does is they are now going to be hiring 20 people, not because of us at this point, but when a company grows and expands, they're employing more people, more money's flowing down into the local economy, and more families are taken care of. And that's the sort of the back end of what I really do. We get there through marketing and sales and entrepreneurship growth, but at the end of the day, we're affecting communities in a positive way.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the work that I'm doing. And that's why I can do it with such energy, because if I get an entrepreneur from going from solopreneur to a team of 5, he or she is now employing 5 families and feeding 5 families. And if they can take care of their 5 families, they're going to then move, I'm saying? It's a trickle down effect into economies. And so that is my geeky passion at the end of the day. I can't put that on the homepage of the website, but that's why I do this.
Beautiful. Darrell, thank you so much. And
thank you, Christine,
listener, for listening. I remember to check out the video so you can see Darrell's montage of cool stuff behind his head here. And
thank you.
And if you want to watch the video, that's on the YouTube channel, which is Boston RE Guru. And I just, thanks, Darrell. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me.